Let's go.
What's the page? Um, just lost the page. Is it Yud Hey? If one was married to four wives and he
No, no,
died, the
no,
first
no, no, no. You'd base. Hey is the new ones.
Yud base. All right, that's why I took my thing out when you talk about Yud base. Okay. Yeah, okay, Yud base. Yud base. If one was married to two wives and they died, and subsequently he died, and the orphans claimed their mother's ketubah, for there is only enough for the two ketubahs that share equally. If there was a surplus of a dinner, these take their mother's ketubah, and those take their mother's ketubah. If the orphan said, "We evaluate our father's property at a dinner more in order that they should take their mother's ketubah," we do not heed them. Rather, we appraise the property in court. If there were prospective assets, it is not like that in possession. Shimon says, even if there are chattels, it is naught, unless there is real property exceeding the two kusubas by a dinner. If one was married to three wives and he died, and this one's kusuba was 100 zuz, this one was 200, and this one was 300, there was only 100 to share equally. If there is one 200, the one with the kusuba of 100 takes 50 zuz, the one with the kusuba of 200 takes, with the kusuba of 300 takes three dinners each. If there were 300, the one with the ketubah of 100 takes 50. The one with the ketubah of 200 takes 100. And the one with the ketubah of 300 takes two 6 gold dinners. Likewise, if they deposited money into a fund, if they had a loss or profit, they share in that manner. If one was married for four wives and he died, the first takes precedence over the second over the third, and the third over the fourth. The first swears to the second to the third, and the third to the fourth, but the fourth is paid without an oath. Benana says, should
Oh,
she
wait, wait,
profit?
wait. Sorry, sorry. This is mine. This is the new stuff.
Okay.
Okay. I think you might have skipped the page while you were busy reading there, which is why. Mishna Hey. Let's just start from the beginning of Mishna Hey. Misha Haya Nasoi Arba Nashim. So a guy is married to five wives, sorry, four wives, and they've got their kesubas in dated order. Okay.
All right.
So now he dies, and now the wives start wanting to get a piece of the estate. Okay, but the estate is we're not sure that the estate is going to be enough to cover all of their kesubas. Rishona kodemus l'shnia. The first woman takes precedence over the second. Shnia l'shlishis, shlishis l'revi'is. So they have their pecking order. Who gets first dibs on what's left of the estate? However, because they're competing with each other. Normally, a woman doesn't need to take a shavua in
Mhm.
order to claim her kasuba, because that's just the assumption. But because each of these women has got a right to the estate, each one of the succeeding women can make the women before her take an oath that she has not already claimed any of her kasuba. Okay. Harishona nishbas l'shnia, shnia l'shlisis, shlishis l'revi'is. So they all can force the previous one to take a shavua before they're allowed to take what's due to them. Haravi'is nifras shelo b'shavua. But the fourth one has nobody to swear to, therefore she just takes without a shvua. And who would have forced her is the Yorishim, of course. The Yorishim would say, wait, don't you take a shvua because maybe the money belongs to us. With the Kasuba, the Yorshim don't get the right to make her swear. It's only okay. But says Ben Nanas, how does that work? How is it possible that she is the lowest in the pecking order, and yet she gets away without having to take a shvua? Afi lo tipara ela b'shvua. No, she must also take a shvua. Why must she take a shvua to the others? Because Archibald explains that there's a theoretical possibility that one of the properties that one of the wives has before her took as part of her kasuba, it'll turn out that it was a stolen property. And now the real owner comes with proof and extracts it from her, and she says, but okay, she's coming back to the estate and says, wait, I want my money. Meanwhile, everyone's taken all the money, so they can force her to take a shvua to make sure that she leaves enough that she's justly taking out of the state in case of the exceptional case that we just described. Okay. Hayu yotzos kulan biyom echad. What happens if all the kesubas were on the same date? Kol hakodemes lechaverta afilu sha'a achas zachsa. If there is a time written on the kesuba, then you can use the time as a basis for saying who gets precedence. V'kach hayu kosvin b'Yerushalayim shalos, and that was the minhag in Yerushalayim that they would actually put a time on the kesuba. Hayu That's actually an interesting thing. That kind of implies that that people would get married to two women on one day, and you have to make
Right.
sure that the kasuba has got the got a time on it. Mm, I never actually thought of that before. But that's a funny angle of the of that minhag. Anyway, hayu kulan yotzos b'sha'a achas. What happens if they are all at the same time? Or ve'ein sham elamane cholkos b'shaveh. And if all that you've got is 100 zuz, then of course that's the case that we just had in Mishnah Daled, where there's very little left and everyone takes equally. Hey, here's another fun case in Mishnah Vav. Misha hayan nasoy shtei nashim. So a guy's got two wives, okay, and there's a first wife and a second wife. Where the first wife, of course, has got precedence over the second wife. Umacharis sadehu, and the man sold his field. The kasva rishona lalokech. So he sold his field, which should have been meshubad to the kesuba. But the first wife said to the wrote a shtar to the purchaser saying, "Din udvarim ein li imach." It said, this field was sold with my permission, and even though I know that my kesuba is that it's supposed to be meshubah to my kesuba, but I give permission for this field to be sold. Okay, but the second one did not sign any such document. So what happens is the lokeach has got the field. The man dies. Second wife comes to the Lokech and says, "Excuse me, that field is meshubad to my kesuba. I want that field back." So she grabs the field back from him. Rishona, now the first wife comes and says to the second wife, "Excuse me, that field is meshubad to my kesuba, and my kesuba comes before your kesuba." So she grabs it from the second wife. The Lokeach comes and says, "Hey, hang on, you got that field, but you said that you've got no claim to that field, and I've got the shtar where your husband sold this field to me, so I'm grabbing it back." So what you have over here is a perfect circle of everyone's got a claim on everyone else. It's like a rock, paper, scissors over here. Okay,
Okay.
so you got rock, paper, scissors, and v'chosros chalila. Each one can keep claiming from the other one because the strength of one is the weakness of the other. Okay, Ad sheyasu pshara b'neihem. They're going to have to come and make a compromise between them. V'chein Baal Chov, and you can have such a situation also with a Baal Chov, where you can contrive such a situation where you've got three claimants who all who can go around in a circle. V'chein Isha Ba'alas Chov, and same thing for a woman who is a creditor. In other words, she's got a kasuba on her husband and she has signed such a thing. We don't need to go too much into the details to recontrive that situation. We just know it's possible. And if you get into such a situation, all you can do is get the people in a room together and say, "Listen, sort it out."
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Big Perik. Almana nizones min nichsei yisomim. Now, what happens the if an almana doesn't want to leave her husband's house? Yeah, she's been living there for whatever 50 years, and her husband dies, and now her children are her children there, which might be children from another wife, might be her own children. Mm. And she does not inherit her husband. The children inherited her husband. Okay. So while as long as she is living in her husband's house, the children are obliged to support her from the Yerusha. Okay, that's one of the things of the Kesubos is that from his estate she can carry on living from his estate as long as she hasn't left and remarried or anything like that. Okay, but on the other hand, Maase yadeha shilahin. So this is one of those things of the Kesuba has a couple of I think it's got three provisions that are sort of in exchange for each other. Um, the husband is obligated to provide mazonos to his wife. He has to sustain her, but in return, he gets maseh yadeha. Mazonos maseh yadeha. There's a mem. Okay. Um, so that's how you can remember it. One of the other things that he has to provide for her is kavura. That if she is if, that if she predeceases him, then he has to take care of her burial. Now, what does he get in exchange for that? He gets the kasuba, kavura and kasuba. Um, and what is it? There's and then for Pidyon, if she's ever captured, he has to redeem her. And so for Pidyon, you have Peiros. He gets to enjoy the Peiros of her fields. Okay, so back into our situation now. When this devolves onto the Yorshim, the husband is no longer around, but she still has the right to Mazonas, and therefore the Yorshim have the right to Maaseh Yadeha. If she carries on working, then they're entitled to her Maaseh Yadeha. Ve'ein chayavin b'kvurasa. However, since the Kesuba did not go to the Yorshim, but Kesuba went to her, then when she dies, Yorshe Kesubasa chayvim b'kvurasa. So whoever inherits her Kesuba, which is her Yorshim, whether it's her children or if she didn't have children, then her father's house, then they get to they since they get to keep the Kesuba, they also are chayiv in her Kavura. Okay,
Where we are.
Zayin Ches.
Okay. Okay. Zion Hess. If bodily defects were upon her while she was still in her father's house, the father must bring proof that these defects came about after she was betrothed and that his misfortune had caused it. If she entered the husband's authority, the husband must bring proof that she had these defects before she was betrothed and that his acquisition was made in error. And these are the words of Rameya. The sages, however, say that when does this apply in the case of hidden defects, but in the case of exposed defects, he cannot make a claim. But if there is a bathhouse in that city, even in the case of hidden defects, he cannot make a claim because he examines her through his female relatives. As for a man upon whom bodily defects came about, he is not coerced to divorce his wife. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says when there is supply in the case of minor defects, but in the case of major defects, he is coerced to divorce her. And these are the ones who coerce the divorced. A leper, of one afflicted with offensive nasal smell, one who gathers, one who mines copper, and a tanner, whether they had them before they were married or they came after they were married. Concerning all of them, Meir says if he stipulated with her, she can say, I thought I would be able to endure it, but now I cannot endure it. The sages, however, say she must endure it against her will, except the leper, because she causes his flesh to decay. He once happened in Sidon that a Tana died, and he had a brother who was also a Tana. The sages say, sages said, she can say, your brother I could endure, but you I cannot endure. Hey.
Okay, Yavamas.
Um, okay, we have Yud Dalet Aleph.
Yeah.
If a deaf mute married a companion woman, if a deaf woman married a competent woman, or a competent man married a deaf mute woman, if he wishes, he may divorce her, and if he wishes, he may retain her, just as he married by gesturing, so he may divorce by gesturing. If a competent man made a competent woman and she became a deaf mute, if he wishes, he may divorce her. If he wishes, he may retain her. If she became insane, he may not divorce her. If he became a deaf mute or insane, he can never divorce her. Rabbi Yochanan ben says, why is it that a wife who became a deaf mute may be divorced, but a husband who became a deaf mute may not be divorced? They replied, a husband who divorces is not comparable to a wife who is divorced, since a wife may divorce with or without her consent, while a husband cannot divorce except by his consent. Rabbi Yochanan ben Good Gedda testified that a deaf mute who was given in marriage by a father may be released by a bill of divorce. They said to him, this one is also the same. Okay. I think that's it, right? Yeah.
Shnei Achim.
Okay.
Yeah.
If two brothers were married to two deaf-mute sisters, or two competent sisters, or two sisters, or one a deaf-mute and one competent, or if two deaf-mute sisters were married to two competent brothers, or two deaf-mute brothers, or to two brothers, one a deaf-mute and one competent, these widows are exempt from Kalitza and from Yibum. If they were not related, they should marry, and if they may then wish divorce, they may. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And Mesa. If a firstborn fell into a pit, Rabbi Yehuda says an expert may go down and look at the blemish. If the expert finds that it has a blemish, he may bring it up and slaughter it, but if not, he may not slaughter it. Rabbi Shimon says in any case, where the blemish was not detected on before Yom Tov, it is not considered to be prepared. If the animal died, one may not move it from its place. There was an incident, and they asked Rabbi Tarfon about this matter and about Kala, which had contracted tumor contamination. They entered the house of study and asked, and said to him, he may not move them from their place. We may not be counted initially for the meat of an animal on Yom Tov, but we may be counted for its meat prior to Yom Tov and slaughter the portion of it among ourselves. The Yehuda says a person may weigh meat against a utensil or against a chopper, but the sages say we may not use a scale at all.
Okay.
Okay. And we are in Micros. Okay. If one says to his fellow, "Here is this Isser, and give me for it 5 figs," he may not eat before tithing them.
Wait. We're supposed to be on Dalit. Go back one.
Solid. Okay. Sorry. If one separated truma from produce before the conclusion of work on it, Rabbi Eliezer forbids to eat it of a chance meal, but the sages permit except from a large basket of figs. If one separated truma from a large basket of figs, Rabbi Shimon permits, and the sages forbid. If one says to a fellow, "Here is an issue, and give me for 5 figs," he may not eat before tithing them. So says Rebbeah. Rabbi Yehuda says if he eats one by one, he is exempt, but if together he is liable. Rabbi Yehuda said if what happened by in a rose garden in Yerushalayim, that 3 or 4 figs were being sold for an Isser, and Truma and Maisa were never separated from them. If one says to his fellow, "Here is the Issa for 10 figs, which I shall select," he may select and eat them. For a cluster of grapes that I shall select, he may pick the grapes and eat them. For a pomegranate I select, he may eat the seeds and eat them. For a melon I shall select, he may cut slices and eat it. But if he said to him, "For these 20 figs, for these 2 clusters of grapes, for these 2 pomegranates, for these 2 melons," he may eat them in his usual manner and is exempt because he bought them while they were still attached to the ground.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Olios. Okay. Tesvav. Someone who stands in the courtyard of a catacomb is tahor as long as it is 4 cubits, according to Beis Shammai's opinion. Beis Hillel said 4 handbutts. If it was a beam, it was used to cover for a grave, whether it is standing upright or lying on its side, nothing becomes tummy except what is opposite the opening of the grave. If one end of the beam was made into a goel for a grave, only 4 handbutts of the beam become tummy, provided that the rest is going to be chopped off. Rabbi Yehuda says it all regarded as one unit. Someone who touches a slightly sealed barrel full of tahor liquid that was made into a cover for a grave becomes tummy for 7 days. However, the barrel and the liquid remains tahor. Someone who touches an animal used as a cover for a grave becomes tummy for 7 days. The mayor says a living being does not transmit tumor as a cover. If someone touches a corpse and utensils forms a roof over a corpse and touches utensils, the utensils become tummy. But if he forms a roof over a corpse and over utensils, or he touches a corpse and forms a roof over utensils, the utensils remain tahor. If his hand is a handbreadth square, utensils are tummy. There are 2 houses, each of which contains a piece of corpse flesh, half the size of an olive, and the person stretches his hands into the houses. If his hands are as big as a square handbreadth, tumor spreads. If not, tumor does not spread. Okay. And oh, we have Hey, Olive. If one hires a worker to assist him with Nesic wine, his wage is prohibited. But if they hired him to assist him with different work, even though he said to him, "Move a barrel of Nesic wine for me from place to place," his wage is permitted. If one hired a donkey to transport Nesic wine on it, rental fee is prohibited. If he hired it to sit upon, even though it is a $10 or places flag upon it, it is a rental fee is permitted. If Nesic wine fell into grapes, he should rinse them off, and they are permitted. If they are cracked, they are prohibited. If they fell onto dates or onto figs, there is enough of them to give taste. It is prohibited. There was an incident in which Boethius, the son of Zona, brought dried figs by boat, and a barrel of Nessic wine broke, and the wine fell onto them, and he asked the sages if they permitted them. This is the rule. Anything that contributes to the enjoyment by the flavor imparts is prohibited. Anything that does not contribute to his employment and enjoyment by the flavor it imparts is permitted, such as vinegar, which fell onto chopped bean. An idolater was helping a Jew to transport casks of wine from place to place. There was a state of supervision. It is permitted. If he informed them that he was going far, it is prohibited. And if there was time for him to puncture a patch and allow it to dry, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says only if there was time for him to open, apply a new seal, and allow it to dry. Okay, good.
All right.
Okay,
All
on
right.
to
Have a
David.
wonderful day.
A great day.
Yeah.
Enjoy,
Bye.
and hopefully it'll be a quiet day.
Yeah.
Thank